The shocking truth about your son has finally been revealed. But there's one more secret. Stop for a moment, because what you are about to hear may change the way you see everything that has happened in your life. There are moments when the truth hides in plain sight, waiting for the perfect time to reveal itself, and today is one of those moments. For years you may have believed that you understood your son's heart, his silence, his choices, and the distance that slowly grew between you, but the reality is far deeper than anyone could have imagined. This is not just another story. This is about a hidden truth that has been waiting patiently to come into the light, and before this message ends, you will discover that there is still one final secret that no one has dared to speak aloud until now. Stay with this story because every single moment matters. Imagine waking up one ordinary morning believing your life is exactly the same as it was yesterday, only to discover that everything you thought you knew was incomplete. That is exactly where this story begins. A father looked at his son every day and believed he understood him completely. He thought silence meant stubbornness. He thought distance meant disrespect. He thought the dreams in his son's heart were nothing more than childish fantasies that would disappear with time. But every smile the son forced, every conversation he avoided, every late night he spent staring into the darkness carried a secret burden that no one noticed. The world judged him without hearing his heart. Friends misunderstood him. Family questioned him. Even those who loved him the most failed to see the battle he was fighting inside. Yet through every difficult day, he carried one silent promise in his heart that someday the truth would finally reveal itself. There were signs everywhere, but nobody paid attention. The old photographs that he never threw away. The notebook hidden beneath his bed filled with dreams he never showed anyone. The moments when he looked out the window as if waiting for something greater than himself. People called him quiet, but they never realized silence can be louder than words. Deep inside he was protecting a dream that felt too fragile to share with a world that constantly doubted him. Every disappointment became another reason to hide his real feelings. Every criticism became another wall around his heart. Yet despite everything, he never stopped believing that one day the people he loved would finally understand who he truly was. Time continued to move forward, and life became more complicated. Responsibilities grew heavier. Expectations became impossible to satisfy. The son smiled during family gatherings even though his heart felt empty. He laughed during conversations even though his mind was filled with unanswered questions. Everyone believed he was fine because that was the version of himself he allowed them to see. But behind every smile was another untold chapter. Behind every calm expression was another invisible storm. Then something unexpected happened. One small event, so ordinary that almost everyone ignored it, started a chain of discoveries that would change everything forever. An old letter was found hidden inside a forgotten box. It wasn't written to hurt anyone. It wasn't written to blame anyone. It was simply the honest voice of a son who had spent years trying to explain feelings he never had the courage to speak aloud. Every sentence carried love. Every page carried pain. Every word revealed sacrifices that no one had ever noticed. The family stood in complete silence as they realized how much they had misunderstood him. Suddenly memories began returning one by one. They remembered the times he quietly helped others without expecting recognition. They remembered the opportunities he gave up so someone else could succeed. They remembered the dreams he buried because he believed his family's happiness mattered more than his own. Little by little, the image they had created of him started falling apart. The truth was nothing like the story they had believed for years. Their son had never stopped loving them. He had never stopped trying. He had simply chosen to carry burdens alone because he thought protecting everyone else was more important than protecting himself. Tears filled the room as regret slowly replaced judgment. Words that should have been spoken years earlier finally found their way into the open. Apologies were whispered through trembling voices. Long embraces replaced years of misunderstanding. But just when everyone believed the entire truth had finally been revealed, another discovery appeared. There was still one more secret. One final piece of the story that no one expected. Hidden inside the same box was another envelope with only a few words written on the front: "Open this only after you truly understand me." Hands trembled as it was carefully opened. Inside was a message that changed everything once again. The son explained that even if people eventually discovered the truth about him, they must never blame themselves forever because every family makes mistakes, every heart misunderstands at times, and every relationship deserves another chance. He wrote that love should never become a prison of regret. Instead, it should become a bridge toward healing. As those words echoed through the room, something extraordinary happened. Years of emotional distance began disappearing. Conversations that had been avoided for years finally took place. Hearts that had been separated by pride finally moved closer together. Yet the biggest surprise was still waiting. At the very end of the letter was a sentence that nobody expected to read. It simply said, "The greatest secret is not what I have hidden from you. The greatest secret is how much I have always believed in you, even when you stopped believing in me." Those words broke every remaining wall. In that moment everyone realized the greatest strength of the son had never been his success, his intelligence, or his determination. It had been his ability to continue loving people who failed to understand him. That was the shocking truth no one had ever imagined. Sometimes the strongest person in the family is the one who speaks the least. Sometimes the quietest heart carries the greatest love. Sometimes the person everyone believes needs understanding is actually the one who has been understanding everyone else all along. And that final secret became something far greater than anyone expected. It became a lesson that would be passed from one generation to the next. Never assume you know someone's entire story simply because you see their daily life. Never mistake silence for weakness. Never confuse patience with surrender. Every human heart carries invisible chapters that cannot be seen from the outside. Before judging someone, take the time to listen. Before walking away, ask one more question. Before believing the worst, remember that the truth often hides beneath the surface waiting for the right moment to be revealed. As the days passed, the family slowly rebuilt what had been broken. Trust returned one conversation at a time. Hope returned one smile at a time. Love returned one honest moment at a time. The son's story became a reminder that truth may arrive late, but it still has the power to transform hearts forever. And even today, those who hear this story ask themselves one question. How many people around us are silently carrying burdens we have never noticed? How many sons, daughters, mothers, and fathers are waiting for someone to truly see them before it is too late? That is why this message matters. Because perhaps this story is not only about one family. Perhaps it is also about yours. Perhaps someone close to you has been waiting for understanding instead of judgment, compassion instead of assumptions, and love instead of silence. The shocking truth about your son may have finally been revealed, but the final secret is this: the greatest miracle does not happen when hidden facts come into the light. The greatest miracle happens when hearts finally choose forgiveness over pride, understanding over assumptions, and love over fear. That is the secret capable of changing a family forever. The silence that filled the room after those words was unlike anything anyone had ever experienced. It was not the silence of confusion anymore. It was the silence that comes when the truth finally reaches the deepest corners of the heart. Every person standing there suddenly remembered moments they had forgotten long ago. They remembered the evenings when the son quietly asked if everyone had eaten before taking food for himself. They remembered the nights when he stayed awake long after everyone else had gone to sleep, pretending he was simply working, while in reality he was trying to solve problems that he believed no one else should have to carry. Every sacrifice that once seemed ordinary now carried a completely different meaning. The family realized that the strongest people are often the ones who never announce their pain. They simply keep walking, hoping someone will one day notice the weight they have been carrying. As those realizations continued to unfold, another unexpected discovery was made. Hidden beneath the letter was an old journal that had never been opened. Its cover was worn with age, and the pages inside carried years of handwritten thoughts that no one had ever seen. The father hesitated before opening it, almost afraid of what he might discover, but something inside his heart whispered that the truth deserved to be heard completely. The first page contained only one sentence. If you are reading this, it means the day I always prayed for has finally arrived. Those words immediately brought tears to everyone's eyes. As the pages turned, they found story after story of silent victories and hidden heartbreaks. There were entries about dreams that had been abandoned so the family could remain together. There were pages describing moments when the son had almost given up on everything, yet chose to keep smiling because he never wanted anyone else to feel responsible for his sadness. He wrote about birthdays where he celebrated everyone else's happiness while secretly wishing someone would ask how he truly felt. He described nights when he sat alone beneath the stars asking only one question: will they ever know that everything I do has always been for them? Every paragraph revealed another layer of a heart that had loved far more deeply than anyone had imagined. Then came an entry that changed everything once again. It described a conversation the son had overheard years earlier. He had accidentally heard someone say that he would never become anything important, that he would always disappoint those around him. Those words stayed with him for years. Instead of becoming angry, he quietly made a promise to himself. He would never allow bitterness to control his future. He would prove that kindness is stronger than criticism, that patience is greater than pride, and that love can survive even when it is misunderstood. That promise became the invisible force that guided every decision he made afterward. Suddenly the family understood why he had never argued during difficult moments. They understood why he rarely defended himself when others blamed him unfairly. It was not because he was weak. It was because he had chosen peace over revenge. He believed that winning an argument could never compare to protecting the people he loved from unnecessary pain. As the journal continued, another heartbreaking truth emerged. There were countless opportunities where he could have left everything behind and started a completely different life, free from expectations and misunderstandings. Yet every single time he decided to stay. Not because it was easy, but because his love for his family was stronger than his desire to escape. He believed that someday the truth would reveal itself naturally, without forcing anyone to believe him. Reading those pages became almost unbearable. Every sentence carried the weight of years spent silently hoping for understanding. Every memory reminded the family of moments they wished they could relive. If only they had listened more carefully. If only they had asked one more question. If only they had noticed the pain hidden behind his calm smile. But the journal did not end with regret. Instead, it slowly transformed into something much more powerful. The final chapters were filled with hope. The son wrote that even if people misunderstood him for many years, he refused to let disappointment destroy his faith in love. He believed that truth always arrives exactly when hearts are ready to receive it. He believed forgiveness is never a sign of weakness but the greatest strength a person can possess. He believed families are not defined by perfection but by their willingness to heal after they have been broken. Those words echoed through every corner of the house, leaving no heart untouched. Then, just as everyone believed they had finally uncovered every hidden truth, a folded photograph slipped from between the journal's pages. It showed the entire family smiling together from many years ago. On the back, written in careful handwriting, was another message. This has always been my favorite picture, not because everything was perfect, but because it reminds me that love existed long before misunderstandings arrived. Never forget who we were before pain taught us to build walls. Those words shattered every remaining barrier. The father held the photograph close to his heart as tears streamed down his face. The mother whispered his name over and over, wishing she could return to those simpler days. Every family member realized they had spent so much time focusing on mistakes that they had forgotten the countless moments of love that had always existed between them. From that day forward, everything began to change. Conversations became honest instead of cautious. Silence was replaced with understanding. Every meal shared together carried new meaning because no one wanted to waste another opportunity to appreciate each other. The son's story spread beyond the walls of the home. Friends who heard it began calling their own families. Brothers reached out to brothers they had not spoken to in years. Parents embraced children they had unknowingly pushed away. People realized that hidden truths exist in countless homes, waiting for someone brave enough to replace judgment with compassion. Yet even after all these discoveries, one final mystery remained. Near the very last page of the journal was a sealed envelope marked with only a single sentence: "The final secret should only be opened when your hearts have completely forgiven each other." No one dared touch it immediately. Days passed. Then weeks. Instead of rushing toward another revelation, the family focused on rebuilding what had been lost. They laughed together again. They created new memories. They spoke openly about fears they had hidden for years. They slowly became the family they had always wanted to be. Only then did they gather once more around the table where everything had begun. With trembling hands, the envelope was finally opened. Inside was a single sheet of paper. There were no long explanations. No shocking confession. Only one simple message written with remarkable clarity. If you are reading this now, then the greatest miracle has already happened. You did not discover the truth because of these letters. You discovered it because you finally chose to see each other with love instead of assumptions. That is the only secret that truly matters. No one spoke for several minutes. They understood at last that the letters had never been the real miracle. The journal had never been the true revelation. The greatest transformation had happened inside their own hearts. The truth about the son had indeed been shocking, but the final secret was even greater. Real healing begins the moment people stop trying to prove who was right and start fighting for the relationships that matter most. From that day on, the family made one promise that would never again be broken. They would never allow silence to replace honesty. They would never let pride become stronger than love. They would never assume they understood someone's heart without first listening to its story. Because they had learned a lesson that few people ever truly understand. The deepest wounds are often invisible, the strongest hearts are often the quietest, and the greatest acts of love are usually the ones no one ever sees. And somewhere beyond all the tears, all the regret, and all the healing, one truth continued to echo in every heart that heard this story. Sometimes the most shocking secret is not what someone has hidden from us, it is how deeply they continued to love us while we failed to understand them. But even after everything had finally been revealed, destiny still had one unexpected chapter waiting to unfold, a chapter that would test whether this family's newfound love was truly strong enough to withstand the greatest challenge they had ever faced. The days that followed felt different, almost as if the house itself had begun to breathe again. The heavy silence that once filled every room had been replaced with quiet conversations, shared meals, and small moments of laughter that no one had heard in years. Yet deep inside, every member of the family carried the same question. If the truth had finally been revealed, why did it still feel as though something important was about to happen? It was a strange feeling that refused to disappear. Every morning the father found himself staring at the old journal resting on the table, wondering whether there was still a lesson hidden between its pages that everyone had somehow overlooked. The mother often walked into her son's room, not because she expected to find another letter, but because she wanted to understand the person she thought she had always known. Every object inside that room suddenly carried a different meaning. The books arranged neatly on the shelf, the old photographs tucked inside drawers, the small souvenirs collected over the years, they were no longer ordinary belongings. They were silent witnesses to a life that had been lived with extraordinary patience and remarkable love. Then one quiet evening, just as the family gathered together, there was a gentle knock at the front door. No one expected visitors. The father slowly opened the door and found an elderly man standing outside holding a worn leather bag. His face looked familiar, yet no one could immediately remember where they had seen him before. Before anyone could speak, the man smiled softly and said, "I believe I have something that belongs to your son." Those simple words sent a wave of emotion through the room. The family invited him inside, and after sitting down, the stranger carefully placed the leather bag on the table. He explained that many years earlier he had met their son during one of the most difficult periods of his own life. At that time, he had lost almost everything: his health, his confidence, and even his hope. Most people walked past him without saying a word, but their son had stopped, sat beside him, and listened to his story for hours. He offered no judgment, no criticism, only kindness. The elderly man's voice trembled as he admitted that those few hours had saved his life. "You believed your son needed rescuing," he whispered, "but he spent years rescuing people you never even knew existed." The room fell silent once again. Every sentence revealed another side of the man they thought they understood. The visitor opened the leather bag and removed dozens of folded letters. They were thank you notes written by strangers from different places and different stages of life. One letter came from a young student who had nearly abandoned his education until their son secretly paid his school fees. Another came from a widow whose rent had been covered anonymously during the hardest months of her life. There was a note from a small business owner who had received encouragement at the exact moment he had decided to give up. None of these people knew one another, yet every letter carried the same message. They all believed they were alive, hopeful, or successful because one quiet young man had entered their lives when they needed someone the most. The father could barely breathe as he realized how little he truly knew about his own child. He had measured success through achievements and recognition, while his son had measured success through lives quietly changed without expecting applause. The mother wiped away tears as she remembered all the evenings her son returned home late, always claiming he had simply been busy. She now understood those hours had never been spent chasing personal success. They had been spent helping people who could never repay him. Every sacrifice suddenly made sense. Every unexplained absence found its answer. But just when everyone believed they had heard the greatest revelation possible, the elderly man reached into the bottom of the bag and removed one final envelope. Unlike the others, this one had their family name written across the front. "He asked me to deliver this only if the day ever came when you truly understood his heart," the old man explained. The father's hands trembled as he carefully unfolded the paper inside. The message began with words that immediately filled every heart with emotion. "If this letter has reached you, then I know something beautiful has already happened. You stopped searching for someone to blame and started searching for ways to love each other again. That alone means every difficult moment was worth enduring." The letter continued by revealing a truth no one had expected. Their son confessed that he had never considered himself the strongest person in the family. In fact, he admitted there were countless nights when he almost gave up. There were moments when loneliness became so overwhelming that he questioned whether anyone would ever understand him. Yet every time despair tried to take control, he remembered one simple belief. Someone had to choose love first. Someone had to forgive first. Someone had to refuse to let pain become the family's inheritance. So even when he felt misunderstood, he continued choosing compassion over resentment. Even when no one noticed his efforts, he continued believing that kindness would one day return in ways no one could imagine. The family wept openly as each line unfolded. The letter held no anger, no accusations, only gratitude. He thanked his parents for every sacrifice they had made, even when they made mistakes. He thanked his siblings for teaching him patience. He even thanked those who had doubted him because their disbelief had strengthened his determination to become a person whose character spoke louder than any argument. At the end of the page was one final paragraph. If there is one thing I hope you remember after reading everything I have left behind, it is this. Never wait until someone is gone to tell them they matter. Never allow pride to steal years that love could have filled with beautiful memories. Every ordinary day is a gift. Every conversation is an opportunity. Every hug may become a memory that carries someone through their darkest season. Promise me that from this day forward, our family will become known not for the pain we survived but for the love we chose after the pain. No one could hold back their tears. The father stood, embraced every member of the family, and for the first time in many years, everyone cried together instead of alone. It was not the cry of hopelessness. It was the cry of healing. It was the sound of walls finally falling after standing for far too long. As the evening came to an end, the elderly visitor quietly prepared to leave. Before walking out the door, he turned back with one final smile and said, "The world may never fully know who your son really was. But everyone whose life he touched will carry his kindness forever." That is a legacy greater than fame, wealth, or recognition. After he disappeared into the night, the family stood outside watching the empty road in complete silence. Somehow the darkness no longer felt frightening. Instead, it felt peaceful, as if every hidden truth had finally found its rightful place. Yet deep within each heart remained the understanding that this was not the end of the story. The greatest legacy their son had left behind was not the journal, the letters, or the secrets. It was the challenge to become people who loved without keeping score, forgave without waiting for apologies, and noticed the silent battles others fought every single day. And as the stars slowly filled the sky above their home, every member of the family silently made the same promise: they would honor his memory not merely by remembering his words, but by living them. Because they had finally discovered that the most powerful truth was never hidden inside an envelope or a journal. It had been quietly waiting inside their own hearts, ready to transform their lives the moment they chose love over judgment, understanding over assumptions, and hope over regret. But as peace finally settled over the family, none of them realized that destiny was preparing one last unexpected visitor, someone connected to their son's past who carried a revelation so astonishing that it would redefine everything they believed this incredible story had already revealed. The following morning arrived with an unusual sense of peace. For the first time in years, the family did not wake up carrying the weight of unanswered questions. Instead, they gathered around the same table where so many painful truths had been revealed, and they sat together in complete silence, not because there was nothing left to say, but because their hearts had finally learned to understand one another without needing many words. Yet as the sunlight slowly filled the room, another gentle knock echoed through the house. This time no one felt fear. The father opened the door and found a young woman standing quietly with tears in her eyes, holding a small wooden box wrapped in a faded cloth. She introduced herself softly and explained that she had known their son during one of the most difficult chapters of her life. She had searched for the family for years because she had made a promise that one day she would deliver this box into their hands. The room fell silent once again as everyone invited her inside. She carefully placed the box on the table before saying something that no one would ever forget. Your son never wanted anyone to know what he did for me because he believed that kindness loses its beauty the moment it seeks recognition. Those words alone brought fresh tears to every eye. Slowly, she opened the wooden box. Inside were dozens of small photographs, handwritten notes, and a simple bracelet that had become worn with time. She explained that years earlier she had reached a point where she believed her life had no purpose left. She had lost hope, lost confidence, and almost lost herself. On the very day she had decided to give up, their son happened to cross her path. He did not give her money. He did not make impossible promises. He simply sat beside her and listened. For hours he listened without interrupting, without judging, without trying to fix everything. Before leaving, he handed her the bracelet and said, "One day you will smile again, and when that day comes, promise me you will become the reason someone else smiles too." At the time those words seemed impossible to believe. But slowly her life changed. She found strength, rebuilt her future, and dedicated herself to helping others who were struggling. She smiled through tears as she looked toward the family and whispered, "Everything I became started because your son believed in me before I believed in myself." The father lowered his head, overwhelmed by emotions he could no longer contain. Throughout his life he had worried about whether his son would become successful, respected, or admired. Now he realized his son had achieved something far greater. He had quietly planted hope inside hearts that the world had forgotten. The young woman then unfolded one final letter that had been hidden beneath the photographs. "He told me this letter was only for his family," she said. "He believed the right moment would eventually come." With trembling hands, the mother began reading aloud. "My dear family, if these words are reaching you now, then I know something beautiful has happened. I know you have discovered that love is never measured by perfect moments but by the willingness to keep loving even after misunderstandings. If I could ask for one final gift, it would not be flowers, tears, or endless regret. My only wish is that you continue becoming the family I always believed you could be. Please laugh together again. Celebrate birthdays with joy. Forgive quickly. Speak kindly. Never leave home after an argument without saying, 'I love you.' Life changes faster than anyone expects, and tomorrow is never guaranteed. Promise me that no one in this family will ever carry silent pain alone again." Every sentence echoed through the room like a gentle reminder that love is strongest when it is expressed while there is still time. The letter continued, "Do not remember me only for the sacrifices I made. Remember me every time you choose patience instead of anger. Remember me every time you help a stranger expecting nothing in return. Remember me every time you encourage someone who has forgotten their own worth. If you truly want my story to continue, let it continue through your actions, not your sadness." By the time the final lines were read, no one could hold back their tears. Yet those tears no longer carried only sorrow. They carried gratitude. Gratitude for a son whose greatest achievements had remained hidden because he never believed kindness needed an audience. Gratitude that the truth, though delayed, had arrived before it was too late to transform every heart in the family. The young woman quietly stood to leave, but before reaching the door she turned back one last time. "He once told me something I have never forgotten," she whispered. "He said the greatest legacy a person can leave behind is not wealth, fame, or success. It is becoming the reason someone else believes in love again." Those words settled deeply into every heart. After she left, the family remained together until sunset, sharing memories they had never spoken about before. They laughed through tears, apologized for old mistakes, and embraced each other without hesitation. For the first time in years, the house no longer felt like a place filled with regret. It felt like a home again. Weeks turned into months, and the promise they had made slowly became their new way of living. They visited neighbors who needed help. They reached out to relatives they had not spoken to in years. Birthdays became celebrations of gratitude instead of routine traditions. Every family dinner ended with words of appreciation because no one wanted another day to pass without reminding each other how deeply they were loved. The story of their son quietly spread from one heart to another. People who had never met him found themselves inspired to forgive old wounds, reconcile broken relationships, and become more compassionate toward those whose struggles could not be seen. Without realizing it, the son who had once believed no one truly understood him had become a silent light guiding countless others toward hope. And as the seasons changed, the father often returned to the garden where his son had loved to sit in silence. One evening, while watching the sunset paint the sky with colors of gold and crimson, he finally whispered the words he had carried inside for far too long. "I understand now. I am proud of you. Thank you for teaching us what love truly means." At that very moment, a gentle breeze passed through the trees, and although no voice answered, every heart somehow felt that the message had been received. They no longer searched for hidden secrets because they understood that the greatest secret had already been revealed. Love is strongest when it asks for nothing in return. Kindness is most powerful when no one is watching. Forgiveness changes lives more deeply than revenge ever could. And the people who quietly carry the heaviest burdens are often the ones filling everyone else's lives with hope. That became the family's greatest lesson and their greatest inheritance. From then on, they chose to honor their son not with endless mourning, but with everyday acts of compassion, generosity, honesty, and love. His story did not end with a shocking revelation. It ended with a family transformed forever, proving that even after years of misunderstanding, hearts can heal, relationships can be restored, and love can become stronger than pain. And if there is one final truth this story leaves behind, it is this: never wait for a hidden letter, a forgotten journal, or a heartbreaking goodbye to tell the people you love how much they mean to you. Listen while they are speaking. Stand beside them while they are struggling. Believe in them before the world does. Because the greatest secret is not hidden inside a box or written on a page, it is found in the choice we make every single day to love more deeply, forgive more freely, and treasure the people beside us while we still have the chance. The end.